Hello, Muffins. This is a little Shaun of the Dead video for you. This is going to be all about the opening of Shaun of the Dead, and we're going to talk about narrative, and we're probably going to use a little bit of ideological language as well. Um, so, when you're watching something, especially an Edgar Wright, editing is really, really significant to this particular film and how he's choosing to make meaning. Usually with editing, it's considered to be one of the more difficult elements of form to talk about because it's supposed to be invisible. You're not supposed to notice it, but that's not the case here. So I always think just a little signpost here about the importance and editing styles here is going to be really good for us. So opening sequence, let's begin. Already, even before we have any visuals to talk about, we have got some sound indicators here to indicate that it's science fiction. And I would say that these are not just sort of like science fiction sounds, but they are B-movie kind of like science fiction sounds. So it's kind of like set to have that kind of like tongue-in-cheek kind of like genre hybrid of like a little bit of comedy in with the horror as well, because as we know, this is a rom-com, so we're looking at codes conventions from across three different genres to be able to deconstruct here. So when we're looking at an opening sequence, we are of course looking for world building and verisimilitude. We're looking at how the equilibrium is established and what the meaning of the equilibrium is. So within the exposition, we're also looking as well at how the protagonist is established. All those bits of vocabulary that begin with E is what we want in the opening. Okay. We have these kind of ghostly sirens coming through, and then our track is Ghost Town. So they're talking about, so that track is there, gives us connotations of this idea of the homogeneous mass and that everybody's living in a state of false consciousness. Everyone is already a zombie. Here we go. So our opening image, always great to talk about the opening shots. If you ever get stuck, just opening and closing shots are always really, really meaningful. So what we've got here is Shaun. He's giving us the 1,000-yard stare there, staring into space. He's already the zombie, isn't he? He's already checked out of society. He is typical Gen X sort of slacker. He's kind of iconic, really, of the Gen Xers, and he and this idea that he's not really living his life. He is quite happily existing in this zombified state of false consciousness. He's really, really happy. Well, I don't think he's really happy, but he's content in the state.
Last orders, please.
So the camera is, we're having sort of like a pull back here, tracking out, distancing us from him. So it's creating that quite intimate sort of like recognition and alignment quite early on, and then pushing the audience away so we can absorb more of the verisimilitude.
Shaun.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
So, Shaun, do you see what I'm saying? We have got Liz, there she is, mid conversation, and it's played for laughs. It's played for this idea that he's obviously, of course, he's not listening. But in terms of proxemics here, we have got this lady here in the background that she was worried about, sort of like staying in the pub and wasting her life. And then on her shoulder here, the proxemics are really interesting. We have that person there, the person that she could become.
Totally.
I know he's your best friend, but you do live with him.
I know.
It's not that I don't like Ed.
So the interesting here in terms of how Liz's character is established is that she's coming across as they're not having an argument, but they're having a disagreement. He's being very placid, she's being very active. And the script here is really, really interesting because it's playing with what these two aren't really saying to each other. So on the surface, they're having a conversation about they want to spend more time together, and then with the editing and the dialogue coming up, we've got this kind of like exploration of the sexual tension between the two of them, and other people in sort of like are interrupting their conversation to tell the audience that information.
Ed, it's not that I don't like you.
Sorry?
Little whip pan there. It kind of gives it like a comic book feel. That's sort of like that playful use of cinematography, and then we've got great proxemics here. He's literally in the middle of the two of them.
It'd just be nice if we could
Fuck.
spend a bit more time together.
Bollocks.
Just the two of us. It's just with Ed here. It's no wonder I always bring my flatmates out, and then that only exasperates.
So Shaun here kind of reminds me of a schoolboy who's being told off, and the costume sort of like adds to that element as well. It's part of the sort of like the Gen X identity that they are existing in a state of arrested development, which means that they're kind of like still trying to cling on to sort of like being children. So Shaun here, the costume and everybody sort of like talking at him and telling him he appears to be quite childlike in this scene.
These things.
What do you mean?
Well, you guys hardly get on, do you?
No, what does exacerbate mean?
It means to make things worse.
Right.
So Liz is performing this role of girlfriend and teacher and sort of mother, she alludes to earlier on as well. So we can kind of like see from her perspective how this isn't a fulfilling relationship for her, because she is trying to like perform all these various roles for him, but there's not that two-way street coming back.
Well, I mean, it's not that I don't like David and Di.
So we have repetition
Guys, it's
here,
not that I don't like you.
proxemics again.
And it's not I don't want to spend time with you, because I do.
And this scene is really, really full of what we call Chekhov's gun moments within the narrative. All these little observations that you will pick up on once you've watched the film like over and over again. You'll notice that things are happening in the background that are going to be really significant later on. And those are called Chekhov's guns. They're things that are there for you to notice, and you won't know why they're significant until later on. So they're little enigma codes. So you have the person playing darts. That's going to you have the gun, or do we see that in this scene? Not sure if we see it in this scene, but if you look around at the extras and what's going on in the background, it's all choreographed, it's all positioned so that we recognize moments and people and situations later on, so the audience are being prepared for something that we recognize later on. So it's kind of a bit like a MacGuffin, I suppose, if we're going to use a Hitchcock sort of like language. It's kind of like setting up this little sense of deja vu that we're going to get later. We're going to see all these extras, all these people a few times. Kind of like demonstrates how small this little world of Shaun's is.
Ed doesn't have too many friends.
Can I get any of you cunts a drink? Anybody?
No,
thank you. I know.
So this David is established here as like the most irritating of all of them, and the way that they're doing that is this idea that he's interrupting, he's forcing his way into the conversation.
Friends are important.
And that's patronising, but true.
Yeah, I mean, Daz is always taking me to see these listed buildings, and, you know, I'm always dragging him to the theatre.
I'm not so hot on theatre.
Well, how about a nice meal? It's your anniversary soon, isn't it?
It was last week.
Oh, did you do anything special?
I really like how David is wearing the colours of the middle-aged men behind him as well, that blue and brown. If I keep playing, you'll see he's blending into the background. He's a bit anonymous.
Shaun, hog lumps.
Sean, what I'm
See what I
trying
mean?
to say is, I need something a little more.
So pay attention to this. This is Liz's I want speech. So usually in an exposition, one of the characters sets out their I want, sets out their drive. It's setting up the narrative for the whole film here.
I'm spending every night in the Winchester. I want to get out there and do more interesting stuff. I want to live a little. I want you to want to do it too. Oh, listen to me. You sound like your mum. Not that I know what she sounds like.
You still haven't met his mum?
Not yet.
Don't you get along with your mum, Shaun?
No, it's not that I don't get on with her.
Are you ashamed by your mum, Shaun?
No, I love my mum. Yeah, I love his mum. Ed. She's like butter. Ed.
Shaun.
Guys, Liz. Look.
So that moment there where the director's trying to get us to align with Shaun, but at the same time he is like shown so far to be a little bit of kind of like a loser, sort of like slacker, like immature schoolboy type. But we have that editing there, Shaun, Liz, Shaun, and then if I don't know if you picked it up, but there's like a car going past in the background. It's kind of like intensifying that sound, that oppressive sound, and it kind of like allows the audience to experience like the intensity of that sort of like nagging moment for Shaun. So the audience, we're starting to become, a bit more aligned with Shaun, due to like the editing and that little sound effect there, just to make like things a bit more sort of like oppressive for him.
I understand what you're trying to say, okay, and I agree. We should get out there. We'll start tomorrow. All right, I'll book a restaurant. The place that does all the fish. Just the two of us.
Hear like sirens going in the background.
Doesn't change. I promise.
Things are going to change.
Time, gentlemen!
So the time is wrong. So lots of so clever. Lots of indicators there. Time's running out. Things are going to change. Yes, and yes, all those things are correct. But it's those things are set out in the everyday situation. But later we know now that they're going to apply to the zombie apocalypse. And then I really like that he returns to this zombified state of false consciousness at the end of this scene. He switches back off again.
Shaun?
So we have that science fiction, that sci-fi kind of like sound again, and I really love this title sequence. So we have these like bright poppy but sort of sickly and cold color palettes running through it, but within the mise-en-scène here we've got some things that are just really quite poignant. So we've got this trolley boy moving these trolleys around. It's kind of the lowest of the low. It's a really insignificant sort of like role, but this is an old man pushing these trolleys around. It's kind of like talking about life here, isn't it? The meaningless of it. Like, what has he done with his life? It's just pushing trolleys around. Is that what we're doing with our lives? Like this idea of like criticizing our commodity fetishism and our obsession with capitalist agendas. And all this man's done all his life is like push this trolley. This scene is also really cleverly put together. There's there's edits sort of like hidden in like the movement. So we've got like match cuts that are hidden in the movement of the camera. It's constantly moving, and the soundtrack is kind of like comedic and poppy. And it's repetitive. It's a bit like a computer game as well, which links into Shaun's obsessions and this sense of hyperrealism that we get. So here we have the female area. So now we're in the shop, and I want you to pick up on how everything is choreographed. We've got these sickly sweet blues and pinks. Later on in the film, we're going to have much more vibrant color palettes. There's going to be like lots of red, obviously. But at this moment, everything is kind of like pastel. These people aren't really living. They're living in this pastel world, this pastel life where nothing's really feels real. It's kind of a dreamlike sort of like state. So this idea that these people are doing these choreographed actions is really interesting, because they're kind of like these like characters in games, non-player NPCs. Sorry, I lost the word there. They're kind of like these NPCs who are on sort of like idle, who are just repeating these same motions over and over again. So again, it's talking about this idea of already being a zombie, already being stuck in a state of false consciousness. That's Mary. We're going to see her later. All these characters, we're going to see them later. So, some of these like little moments feel a little bit gendered. So we have like the more sort of like business-looking men at the bus mostly. There's a woman at the back there, and they're all staring at their phones, kind of obsessed, or staring into space. All of these people we're going to see later as zombies. It's so like cleverly put together. It's so interesting. And again, they're all dressed in the same color palette, these grays and blues. It's all really washed out. No one's really living their life. No one's vibrant. No one's standing out. Everybody is just staying in their lane, already a zombie. So do you see how there was the edit hidden there and sort of like the movement of someone walking past the camera? It's like it hit a wipe. And again, just really, really hammered home. We've now got like the teens. Are they a bit old for teens? I can't really tell. So, and they are as well, all these choreographed movements. It's all about telling us that we are already zombies. And they're each sort of like little moment that we go to, the movement's becoming more and more exaggerated, but the movement is always choreographed. So in terms of performance here, they're kind of doing that zombie sort of like shuffle that we learn more about later in the film. So you see there's a car, or there's a person, or there's a lamppost hiding the edits. Okay. So we're being reintroduced to Shaun here. We have kind of reminds me a little bit of Nosferatu with those shadows. So there's a little bit of kind of like a German expressionist use of shadow there. And the gag here relies on the fact that the audience is somewhat aware of like zombie like genres, that they're going to be some cultural capital here. But this is a pretty sort of like neat gag. He's doing the zombie shuffle and then he's doing the zombie moan, but he's just waking up, he's just yawning. So really good physical comedy here throughout. I'm going to stop here. The mise en scène is really interesting to observe because it's going to so many things in this exposition are then repeated later for comedic value or for meaning later on. So if we just like take a mental image of this now, because when we do the closing scene, we're going to look at the differences in between the mise en scène here and there. So in this scene, we have very cluttered, messy, chaotic, studenty like place, like, and we've also got like we've got some iconic things here for sort of like druggies. We've got stoners as well because they're the slacker generation. You've got the bongos and you've got like the ashtrays here, but most of it, as we can see, is just like pizza boxes, food, mess. There's mess in every corner. It doesn't feel very lived in, doesn't feel very loved. Oh, there's the records. They're going to be important later. And it all just feels a bit more like a squat than a place to live. So again, these guys aren't really living. They're just existing. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Hope you found that useful somehow. And I'll see you soon, muffins. Thank you. Bye-bye.